Thanks everyone for joining me. This is April with another episode of the Travel Collective where I have amazing conversations with others who love to travel since I'm always inspired by people who love to travel. I guess they're just my people. So I'm excited to meet Elaine and chat with Elaine today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you too.
Thanks. So I've been toying with this whole idea of wanderlust, and if we feel that it's something we're born with. I've met people that, they've always had that idea of exploring and escaping and traveling, and other people are like, I don't know, it's something that's been nurtured in them to be curious. So, what are your thoughts around wanderlust?
So I personally think for me, it's in my DNA. The story goes that my parents met, my mom was born in Germany, in Berlin, and my father was in the army in Munich. They met and they got married and moved here. But their whole relationship was my father wanting to, he was an American, he was born in New York. He always had that wanderlust. He did. Now, the interesting thing is when my parents got married in Berlin in 1964, my grandparents, his parents, took a cruise around the world
Oh my
in
gosh.
1964. And they were one of the few people to go to Russia. They literally missed the wedding because they were traveling around the world. So I grew up kind of being torn between, all my summers were spent in Europe. My sister and we were always travelers. I mean, I remember my little backpack. I remember having to carry my own suitcase at a very young age. But now hearing the stories of, my grandparents were like that,
Yeah.
even times when people didn't travel. So to me, it's kind of for me and my family, it's really in our DNA. It's part of our genetic makeup of who we are.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I can't even imagine what travel must have been like all those years ago. Or even for you going to Europe, on nicer planes, real meals on a on an airplane.
They sometimes show in TV. It's funny. I remember Pan Am was the airline we used. I grew up in Pennsylvania. We used to drive to JFK, park the car. My father would shut down his orthodontic practice. We'd be gone for 4 weeks. And I remember we had one suitcase, one backpack. No, remember, this time I was born in 1972. We had no electronics. I got
Right.
nauseous reading books. So I had to stare out of the window, kind of absorbing, the environment I was in. But I remember at one point, I remember being 12 years of age going, how come I've never seen the Grand Canyon, but I've seen everywhere in Europe? But at the time, I was almost embarrassed because I felt like, oh, I want that camping, that quintessential camping US, summer vacation.
Right.
Going to Disney World. And my parents were like, we're going to go take you, to France. And I didn't appreciate it. And then as I got older, I'm like, what a unique childhood that my sister and
Yes.
I to go to, my father was amazing he planned themes, and I do the same with my family. He would say, okay, we're going to do walled castles.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
he would go all around Europe and just see for 3, 4 weeks walled castles. And then by the end, we're like, we don't want to see another walled
Yeah.
castle.
Right.
And one year he did a gastronomical tour and we went all around France and did all Michelin star restaurants.
Oh
And
my gosh.
my sister and I at one point said, "Can we just have room service? Can we just have burgers in the hotel room?"
Yeah.
But it's my best memories. I look at my parents that they gave such a foundation for adventure and meeting new people and cultures and almost I feel it's that part of wanderlust. I'm sure you feel the same is accepting others because
Yes.
we're all similar, but we're all can be different as well. So I definitely have that as well.
Oh, what amazing memories. But I think it's so true when we're kids, we always want what we don't have. We want just the hamburger versus eating in the fancy restaurant. And the kid that has the hamburger is like, oh man, I wish I could, they hear about the kid that gets to go to Europe and come back with all the amazing Nutella and whatever it is that's not available yet at that time. So,
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was always jealous that my friends would have a friend and they would go to the Jersey Shore. And I remember being so upset of like, I can't go to Ocean City, Maryland. I'm here. I'm in Switzerland. But at the time, you really do look back going, really? That's what I was, because now I would kill for 4 weeks in
yes,
Europe
I
and get home.
know.
But it
Right.
is the grass is always greener. But I didn't know anything different. My sister and I were each other's companions, and she's 5.5 years older, and I was like tagging along whatever she did, one of those. But it was just it's now I look like God, those experiences to me, and I've taken my kids on a lot of these trips.
Oh,
I've
good.
because I want them to see what I did growing up. So
Well, and hopefully you have your notes that your dad made of all of these themed trips. I mean, those alone, it's just amazing. Because I know for most of us that grew up kind of pre like Instagram and cell phones, we don't even have that many pictures of these amazing experiences.
we don't. And when both my parents are now gone, and I remember going through their photos, and there were so many, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of photos. And my sister and I are like, well, it's a building. We don't know which city this was. And we
Yeah,
both kind of made the choice of, unless we were in the photos, there's only so much we can keep because we didn't have many photos, but they were very much of buildings. Some I can piece together, like, oh, I remember that, or before my time. But I remember, you said it, we didn't have nav systems.
right.
So my father used to plan for 1 year. When we got back in summer, we got back in September, he would plan the trip for the next August, pretty much
Oh,
with this map in our living room, map it out. He'd have to call the hotel. He'd have to organize how long we were gone for. How do you get from point A to point B? That my sister and I both have that gift of, we can plan trips with a map. We can do, I mean, now it's so easy. There's so many
oh
apps and
my
it can
gosh.
lead you in.
Yeah.
But my father navigated us with maps in a car in the middle of nowhere. You didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have. I mean, I remember us once. My both my parents spoke multiple languages. I remember my father once. We got lost in the middle of nowhere, France, and he saw a bicyclist and said, spoke in French and said, "Oh, can you help us? We're trying to find this place." And so we followed this biker who took us to our hotel in the middle of, like, the French Alps, and just, that was my experience as a child, that that's what you had to do. You had to ask people for directions because, go make a right, make a left,
Right.
you found it. So it's wonderful memories my sister and I both have.
Oh, that's fabulous. So tell me about the. I know right before we got on, we were talking about, is it Maldives, Maldives? You
Yeah.
mentioned that as a place you'd like to go repeatedly. So talk to me
Yeah.
about that. I've never been there. It sounds amazing.
So you know how everyone says there's always a bucket list of travel. Maldives was always one of mine. I had that on my list. Something about the huts in the water and
Yeah.
just the turquoise blue water. So I had a business trip. I worked for a great company, and I had a business trip to Singapore. And I remember talking to my husband at the time and said, I'm in this part of the world. Do you care if I just stay for an extra week? I'm already here. It's the company's paying for it. I would pay for, obviously, the middle piece. And so he's like, yeah, no problem. And so a lot of my coworkers, they went to Bali, and they went to other places. And I said, I'm going to Maldives. And he was like, that's like a honeymoon destination. And I was
Yeah.
like, but why? Why couldn't I go by myself? Why
Right.
couldn't I go do it? It was a 5, 6 hour flight from Singapore, and flew into Maldives, and then had to take this, like, small boat over to the
Oh,
hotel. And I was so nauseous from the boat ride and all. And it was such an experience. I ended up having one of those huts in the water, like,
yes.
exactly. I'll have to share photos
Yes.
with
Oh
you.
my gosh. That sounds
Um,
amazing.
it was so incredible. But I went in end of August, beginning of September timeframe, and it tends to be a little bit of the wetter season. So the weather was good, but not, you see the crystal, where it's always so blue, clear skies. It was definitely a little bit more rainy. Now, the interesting thing is, I mentioned I get motion sick.
Yes, you did.
I got motion sick in the hut. So my whole image of what I thought this pristine,
Oh.
incredible experience, the waves kind of crashing at night, and you can feel it on the hut. I never put that into equation. And so my image of, how they say Instagram and, like, Instagram real
Yes.
and what reality is. And it ended up being, you were not allowed to have children under a certain age at the huts. And the neighbor next door had a bunch of kids running and yelling, and I was, like, really queasy and just nauseous. So I went to the hotel, and they upgraded me to a private villa on the beach,
Oh, wow.
which was, private pool, private everything, private outdoor shower. So for, like, 5 days,
Oh
all
my
I did
gosh.
was, like, absorb this incredible, beautiful place. And it was, I think, part of which is good for me for traveling is I need a break from life.
Mhm.
And I was at that crossroads in my life as a mom and a worker, and all this, and a wife, that I needed those days just to kind of regroup And for me, Maldives, I always look at fondly. I'd go back in a heartbeat. Just, I went snorkeling. I met people from all around the world, and I was fine by myself and just kind of exploring. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I do all the time. That was the first, because I always explored as a child. I explored in my 20s, but I got married, I had kids, and then I always bring it someone with me.
Right.
And it was one of those places. I know it's a honeymoon destination, but boy, I had a great time by myself. So,
And I think that's important. I think I don't know if it's more because I for Australian women, because I've met some Australian women, it's very much acceptable for men, for the husbands and wives to spend separate vacations. And a woman explained that once. She was a little older and she was a professional doctor, and she said, "Oh yeah, this is totally normal." Because a few times with me and my husband, I'd be like, same thing. I just need to get away by myself. No offense, it's not you. I just we need
yeah.
time to kind of regenerate. And my mother-in-law would always be like calling my husband while I was gone, like, "Oh, I feel so bad for you. Why is she going off?" And he would just say, "You know what, Mom? It's okay. It's all good." But
Yeah,
just
and you
that
come back
old
healthier.
mentality. Yeah, you do, and that's what he
It is
always
that,
noticed too.
it is that old mentality. And I remember in every September, I write the same post on Facebook and Instagram, and I say, this, how many years ago I did this. And I had more women reach out to me going, "Aren't you scared? You're alone in this area." And I thought, I traveled way before I met my husband. I traveled way before I
Exactly.
met my kid, like had my kids. And I grew up with that. That was my DNA as a child, that I remember flying to Europe by myself at 12. That
Right.
was my birthday present, to go visit my grandparents alone for a month. I look at that, and that's part of, yes, you could be afraid, but think of the alternative. I would have missed all these incredible opportunities. My friends are all around the world. If I didn't take the chance to kind of be alone, I would never see all my friends that are everywhere. One of my best friends lives in Germany. Like,
Oh,
we go
yeah.
back and forth trying to see each other, and I feel everyone needs some time alone. And it's just, for me, it's traveling. Traveling is my like tranquil, just enjoy it more than anything. So,
Yeah, I completely agree. That's so true. So, do you have tips for if somebody wants to go to an exotic destination on their own, ways to find something that matches their personality or?
yeah, I'm happy, for any trip. I love Costa Rica. I loved Ireland. I loved, Italy's incredible. We went to Iceland, last year. We're talking about going to Cuba this year. I change what I want to do depending on my mood. Do I need completely relaxing? Well, then I would do something that there's involved in a beach, and, what type of cuisine, are you, tired from life and don't want to deal with another language. Sometimes
Oh,
I'm like,
true.
oh, England's great because it's so much easier. Australia's great because it's easier. But figuring out what you like. I am an adventure person. So I've been to New Zealand, I've been to Australia, Fiji, like every place. I've kind of always tried to do one fun thing that is a little bit out of my comfort zone. I love zip lining. I've zip lined everywhere. And I think, finding out when's the best time of year to go. Try not
Mm,
to go during busy times. Like, I know sometimes it's hard with work and kids' schedules and whatnot. But sometimes you plan something, then you don't realize, oh, it's the busy
yeah.
season, and this. It's
Right.
so crowded, you don't
Exactly.
enjoy it.
Right. Exactly. Everywhere you try to walk or go, it's just chaotic, and you're just like, "Oh, this wasn't what I had imagined."
Exactly. Like, I remember the first time I went to Paris as a teen and was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And I remember seeing the Mona Lisa for the first time. I'm like, but you're around crowds of people, and, plan. Don't do anything last minute. Like, I think being spontaneous when you're somewhere, but get the tickets ahead for, like, I went to Neuschwanstein. I've been many times, went with a girlfriend in July last year. We got tickets ahead of time. And you know what? They're sold out if you don't plan
Yes,
ahead.
exactly.
So I think, finding the right time, figuring out what adventure you want, and picking a destination accordingly, and then, booking reservations, and be willing to try new foods, local cuisine, ask for recommendations. And that I just all of that just makes for such a great trip. And, plan for the unexpected. There's always something that happens. There, it is what it is. But that's part of the adventure of traveling.
Yeah, definitely. I know you also mentioned encouraging kids to travel. And a lot of people, I think, we do. I mean, both of us came from parents who encouraged us, and travel was just part of something you looked forward to each summer. And we didn't even realize all that they were doing, all the groundwork throughout the year, because my dad was completely like yours. I mean, the paper map, the plan, we'd hear about it for months. So
Love it.
do you have tips now? I mean, now we're in a completely different era where there is just almost too much information. I mean, I have people come to me and they're like, "Oh, I want to do Bar Harbor and I want to do Stowe, Vermont, and I want to do Boston within a week." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you've just tried to cover way too much."
No, I think that's really important. I've helped, similar to you, like people come to me all the time and are like, what would you suggest? And I'm like, well, I lived in Boston and here's, when you go through, you also want your kids to have a chance for downtime. I think just as a parent, and my kids are now, all of them are adults, 24, 19, 18, and they have been traveling since they were, my youngest or my middle one was traveling since she was 4 weeks old,
Oh,
4, 6
wow.
months old. So my
Yeah.
parents were living in Florida and I'm in Atlanta. And I remember that was her first flight. But it was just one of those, yes, I remember the big stroller and shutting the big stroller. Like I'm always that person that will help someone getting on a plane because I'm like, been there, had my kid throw up on me on a plane, had them poop on me in the plane, had them scream in a plane. Like, just know it's the variable of traveling with kids adds complexity. Now that my kids, like, obviously they carry their own bags and they help pack and they help with choices of trips. But I think when you start them young, they enjoy it. Don't go to places. I know some kids, my kids, when they were younger, I didn't do all the, let's go to all the museums and do that. I eased them into that where they had so much energy as children that we did Costa Rica, we did Hawaii, we did things that we knew we can let them kind of go wild and have a
Oh,
day to
yeah.
rest with pool time and make it more, what do you want to do? Like my stepdaughter always wanted to go shopping. So I remember being like, okay, this afternoon, I always planned in the middle, like a rest day. Some of my kids wanted to just be in a hotel room for a few hours gaming on their phone. It is what it is, but then it made for a better afternoon or
Right.
evening.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think just planning with your kids and letting them, explore and starting young, just because then they have it. My youngest son just got back from South Africa with school. He
Oh,
went to Cape
wow.
Town, he went on a safari. And I look at those opportunities that I chose an international school so he would have the opportunity to travel. And it's in his DNA too. We always have a passport ready. My family's still in Germany. And just, at a whim, I'm like, oh, look, we could go do this. And I think as they get older, it's more, I want to be more spontaneous with, hey, I have time. Let's go somewhere fun.
Yeah, exactly. And I think kids too, there's ways now, there's more opportunities to, like you mentioned, the international school. Where do parents find some of these opportunities? Because there's even work study I've heard about, or volunteer vacations. I mean, when I was going through school, it was pretty much only the kids that were going through like the language program that got to go do something as such.
Yeah, it's interesting now that I have kids that, are in college. Almost every university, even state schools, have exchange programs. Look into that for your child. My child, who's graduating this year from high school, he's only looking at colleges that have an exchange program, whether it's like half a year, one semester, or it's a full year. I studied abroad. I did a semester in Germany, and then I lived in Germany for a year between working in graduate school after
Oh,
college.
good.
And so to me, I'm encouraging going, you need to take advantage of it. My one niece did, my other niece didn't. And I think she's missing out that her younger sister went. My sister didn't do it. I was the
Oh,
one that,
really?
so I'm looking at my kids going, don't regret. Life's too goes so quickly. This is the time when you can explore, go look at schools. When you're looking at kids for schools, it's expensive. Like that's the added, I have a little bit lower tuition, but then it's added on for the international trip. Yes, it's more expensive, but there are great programs like EF Tours. I personally know someone who owns a travel agency company that takes, children and families on trips. Reach out to someone and find those trips that, some people can't plan like you and I can, but that's okay. There's other people that are really good at it and they have businesses to do it, and go with a group then if you're not, if you're a little nervous of traveling, but let your see the opportunities, see what your kids are interested in, and let them, explore it and find these new opportunities when they're, in school and then in college as well.
So when the kids were younger, did you involve them in the whole planning process of where to go and what you guys were going to do?
We did. We always did. My husband came from a family, ex-husband, that never did traveling. So for me, it was always, he was like, what do you mean we go on family trips? And I'm like, but that's what we do. Like
Right.
every year we do a trip. And I would time it like, what's the best time? Usually it really was the summer. It's just, it was an easier downtime for work for both of us with the kids being off. And we would talk about what kind of adventure. I'd have normally now with the phone, I do a shared note saying, here's my destination trips. Like I haven't been to Portugal. I'm like dying to go to Portugal. So my kids and I just kind of map out, and each of them makes a comment saying, like, that's how we picked Iceland.
Oh,
We sat down
really?
for a family meeting and I said, okay, here's my top five. What's yours? And Iceland was the common. And so I feel, especially as they get older, you want to pick a trip they want to be at.
Yes.
For them to spend time with you, especially as adults, you better pick a trip they like, because if you're picking something they don't, they're not going to want to be with you.
Right.
And then you're going on a trip where you're just like, oh, well, I'm going to go grab dinner somewhere else. And it's that the whole point is I'm on a family trip to be with my family.
Right.
So let your kids help you kind of choose. I sometimes say as easy as warm climate, cold climate. I used to do fall with my youngest child. My middle one, I would do spring. My middle one loves skiing. My youngest one likes warm weather. So I'm like, I just always had the best of both worlds. And having alone time on trips, that's my favorite thing I did as a mom, was kind of each kid got time alone with me and then time alone with my ex-husband as well.
Yeah,
So
you
that was,
just touched on something that's really cool that you spent one-on-one time with each child separately. I think
yeah.
that's really huge to build that relationship and
It is. And I think it's so important. There's nothing more. And I remember this, my parents, my father and I, we had a passion for skiing when I was growing up. We used to go to Colorado together. And, my father died when he was 71. And I look and go, he had such a full life. But a lot of his favorite memories, he always said, was those trips that he got with my sister and I alone, that we could, explore and just be one on one and just be, us together. And I think I just knew when I was a mom and became a mom that those are the things. And I just wasn't, I mean, trust me, I remember taking the kids alone, having multiple kids, going with a doubler stroller, doing it myself, having one in the front, one in the
oh
back.
my
My kids
gosh.
are 15 months apart.
Yeah.
But I look going, and then eventually I said, well, they need a break from them, from each other. And then it became the one on one. And it just, I think of all the great trips, Vancouver and Seattle and Florida and Boston. And I mean, I just kind of took them in different places depending on what they wanted.
Yeah, that's really a great idea. And I think that there are more opportunities now to do that on a budget, even. There's budget airlines, choosing off season times to travel. Um,
Companion tickets.
yes,
Delta does a
companion.
great job with companion. I mean, it is continental US, because I'm always like, I can't go farther. I wish they would do a little more of the international
Yeah.
piece. But that's a great opportunity. Plan ahead. I used to do every schedule for the kids and map out all their schedules and go, because I had many years where they were in all different schools.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to just map out going, okay, well, when's your fall break? And how do we pull this all off? But if you plan ahead, looking at your kids, calendar, grab the companion ticket, and in the end, there's many ways you can make it cost effective.
Yeah, definitely. So talk to me. You've started a business called Herstories.
I did. Yeah. So about 5, 6 years ago, I work in tech, and I always end up meeting really inspiring women. No offense, many inspiring men, but I always felt it was always his story. And it always bothered me that we talk so much in society. I think men, once again, no offense, really boost themselves up. And when I say someone's inspiring to a woman, most of the time they're like, why am I inspiring? And I think women very often are, a little shy about it, don't feel themselves as inspiring. And so I had this idea years ago, hung up a phone many times with these incredible women in tech and just thought, wow, I'm surrounded by all these incredible women with incredible stories. And so I was going through, a divorce, and said, why have I waited? And so last March, at the beginning of last year, I ended up buying the rights to herstories.com.
Oh,
And
nice.
then I launched it'll be a year with Women's International Month. I started last March. So I'm excited. I'm interviewing women, and I think seeing women overcome, cancer and trauma and divorce and like child loss, it has been such a remarkable journey for me. But to have these women, they are so inspiring. Every one of us is inspiring. And I feel that I want to have a voice to help, tell their stories and make it, to give them a little bit of, some of them have their own businesses, some have, are just trying to survive in the world. And to make people realize you're not alone. As we talked about in the beginning, there's commonality between all of us, and
Yes.
how do we help boost each other up? So that's what was the purpose of Herstories.
So is it just a podcast? Is it going to be turned into a book? Is it a website? Tell us a little bit more of how you're developing it so that others can, hear these stories.
Sure. So I started it with a baseline, and this is all me doing it. So I'm like, I'm doing this, and I have a full-time job. So I joke that I'm like, we talk that, Saturday's fine because I'm doing something with Herstories. I started with the concept of knowing I wanted to do a podcast. But as I started doing it, I realized I like the visual piece of, it's on YouTube, but then I also have it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But then I also, not as faithful, but I have a blog. I am putting resources for women to and men to see these different sites of these incredible women and different businesses people have. And so I'm really trying to do the community and create this community of just inspiring women. And you've said it. What I've seen over the last year of, interviewing 25, 30 people, we all have something, and how do we overcome it, and the resiliency. So you're absolutely right. I've already started taking the transcripts from some of the calls,
Oh, nice.
basically turning it into a book that, how can we inspire each other? And just, when we grew up, I felt the world was kinder and nicer and just more complimentary. And I hearing women reach out, and I get it very often of, oh, I didn't know, I have a trans daughter, and people come up to me and they're like, we didn't know. And oh, I have a trans cousin, I didn't know that this is, and autism and all these topics.
Yeah.
We're just a little more compassionate and learning from each other. So I definitely see a book and other things kind of on the horizon,
Oh,
juggling life, but
no, no, I know, but I think it is. And I think maybe even moving it to getting it into schools and inspiring kids, because like you say, we hear so much about just in the past these men. We've had all of these presidents and scientists, and it's so slanted for men, but there's all these amazing women and currently amazing women doing amazing things, and we need to educate and inspire our young women because I think there is just kind of a lack of, just them being in, families are further apart. It's easier to live further apart. We don't have grandma across the street most times. We don't have our aunt close by. So even these young women, they need to know, hear all these various paths and maybe be inspired by that.
and so many, as you said, so many various paths, and women truly can do anything. And we, for many years, it was like, oh, well, here are the few jobs that women should do. And I know I grew up with that, where my parents are like, my dad was such an advocate for women's rights. He was like, you can do anything, and you and your sister are getting your MBAs, and I want you to be in the boardroom. I want you to be in. He just didn't feel that there should be these glass ceilings, which he was ahead of his time, born in the 30s. So that's
Right.
incredible. But I look and go, if we can help someone and have a child go, hey, I can do this. And I didn't know that was an option. I have some of my friends' daughters are following me and message
Oh,
me going,
good.
I've gone through a hard divorce, I've gone through a lot of things. And people have asked, why are you so transparent? I'm like, why wouldn't I be? Just if I can help one person, two people, but then seeing my friends' kids go, man, you're strong. And they know if something ever happened, they can be strong too. And life throws things at you. And this wasn't the journey I thought I'd be on. And I feel that this has given me a voice for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just how can we continue to bring this to the forefront? Because I think there are a lot of kids, unfortunately, the kind of the good and the bad of the internet. I can't imagine going through school now and just the struggles of social media and yeah, people are still cruel. People are still really
And they
cruel.
were cruel. I'm sure you feel the same. Like everyone always says, oh, would you go back? I'm like, Absolutely not. Not in today's environment. If you weren't invited to a party you didn't know, no one had pictures, no one talked about you, weren't tagged in a photo. That's a really hard element of, I think all kids struggle with confidence and
Yeah.
lack of inner self. And it's like, I can't imagine what they go through. And you do get to the other side, but it's a lot different. You're on a microscope a lot more than we were. We talked about photos. How many
Yeah.
photos do you really have of high school? If I had 50, I'd be shocked for
Oh
4 years.
yeah, exactly.
I'd be shocked. So I do feel that it's a hard generation. And if the, and, I say this, and sometimes social media, I'm on TikTok and people are just mean. And it's like, why? It's just as much as easy to be nice. And I don't get why make a mean comment. Don't say anything. Just, we grew
Yeah,
up,
see,
just
I
don't say
don't
anything.
right. I I'm glad you said that because I say that all the time. Why comment at all? If you don't have something nice to say, what happened to that whole mentality of just move on, just scroll
Move
past
on.
it, you know? Like,
Well, and I try to tell my kids that I'm like, they're trying to make themselves feel better, period. Like, truly, we grew up with the mentality, if you have nothing nice to say nothing.
right.
And now it's like, your voice, you don't need to be speaking if you're going to be, if I think all the time, if I could hurt someone, that is my biggest like life lesson for me is I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. When I do, it hurts me so much because I have such empathy for other people. And that to me, I'm just, why would you want to do that? So I'm trying to teach my kids that, I have one really sensitive child. I'm like, but just know you're going to be hurt. People are going to hurt you. They don't mean to, and some do, but you need a little bit of a little protection that, your
Right.
kindness can hurt you, unfortunately, being so kind. So
Yeah. So, any future plans? You kind of touched a little bit on where you see her stories moving to, because I know it myself, doing a podcast, a travels channel while you're working full time. It's tough. So, where do you see what kinds of people are you looking more to partner with to help move your goal forward?
yeah, I definitely see just I'm on the tip of the iceberg. Like, this. Once you start opening up and then you meet people like yourself and you're like, oh, connecting with people is my favorite thing in the world. I feel that that's the one thing COVID really did bring us was this positive of, hey,
Yes.
we don't need to be in the same room anymore. I have friends that laugh and they're like, can I come and sit on your couch for her stories? I'm like, I'm supposed to doing it kind of remote, but sure, sit on my couch. Um, I feel that I just have lists of women that I'm just inspired by. I can't wait to see where this goes. I definitely have a vision of, I mean, I joke and it's like high reaching, but I'd love to be, a TED Talk speaker and, how do
Yes.
I overcome all the things and what did I learn from all these women? And, I mean, we're talking CEOs, we're talking like just these incredible women and women that are stay-at-home moms. They're just as inspiring. So I'm excited to see where it goes. It through some of my darkest days of surviving a divorce and life and challenges, and I broke my ankle in the fall, and
Oh
like
no.
I've been like, man, I thought this would be my year. But it gets me up. It makes me excited to see when I hear someone in a story. I can't wait to tell that story for two others. So I'm
Right.
excited.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited as well for you, Elaine. I think it's fabulous. And just hopefully to get more women talking, more teenage girls talking, give them outlets to talk to because, in today's world, everything's so busy. There's so much happening, but I don't think a lot of kids aren't getting a lot of that education piece at home or feel like they have a safe place to open up, especially if they're, we all have parents that we always envision the parent as some scary being that,
Yeah.
we can't
Yeah.
talk to and open up to. And
Yeah.
so, how can we bridge that for young women that need someone else to reach out to?
Well, and no, we've heard a lot of things in the news that have been so hard. There's always help. Whether it's, as I said, like I have an open door policy for all my friends' kids. You might not see me often, but I am one, text away from always being there. And they're all at the age where they're starting to be like, wait, she really can give me advice. I don't want to go to my mom about this, but I have a question. It's
Yes.
just, it's just little things like, can I get a tattoo? And I'm like, your mom's going to kill you. But like, but I want to be that person to be like, well, you should, talk to your mom. And I've gone through all this, helping to raise my kids. And I do want a safe environment for kids to know, if you're struggling and you don't know your identity, there are many hotlines and Trevor Project and, if you're struggling, with weight, if you're struggling with, body dysmorphia, there's so many, that's the one thing, there's so many resources, find those resources that can help you, and you're never alone, because that to me is the biggest. There's always someone there to help you. Never feel that you're in darkness and alone. And I think it goes back to what we talked about, like find your peace. And you and I talked from the start. Traveling's what makes me get rejuvenated. It's my thing. And maybe for you, for someone else, it's just traveling to take a walk in a wooded forest, to go around a lake in your area, walk on the beach, whatever that is. I just, find that piece for you, because you'll use it for the rest of your life, finding that kind of, zen place for you.
Right, exactly. So where can people reach out to you, Elaine, if they have opportunities for you to share, to speak, maybe pitch themselves to be a guest with you as well? We need to get your message out there. We need to share these stories with others. So where can people find you?
Thank you so much. Yeah, so you can go to herstories.com. There's you will see all my social links up on the page, and there's links to Spotify and YouTube and Apple Podcasts, and then there's a form on the About section. So if you're interested, even if you have topics, I've had a bunch of women say, I really want to talk about going in menopause, and I'm like, yes, please,
Yeah.
like that topic's coming. So I have a few doctors that I'm trying to get on their calendars, that we start talking. When I grew up, you never talked about these taboo topics. So
Right.
I'm having people just say, hey, can you find a guest on this? This is a topic. So I'm only almost a year in, and I can't wait to see where this goes. But herstories.com, and you can find me there, and always feel free to reach out for any topics. And if you want to be a speaker or want me to be a guest somewhere, I'm happy to do both.
Yay. Thank you so much, Elaine. This has been fascinating. I'll have to check in next year because I think this is amazing, and I'm super excited that you started this and are taking the time to grow it. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you, April, and I look forward to our continued dialogue and conversation.
Thanks.